Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Gains for Girls podcast. I trust that you had a very fantastic and fruitful Thanksgiving. Hopefully you got to spend some time with your family, enjoying time off work. You got to eat good food, and really just allowing yourself to sit in the stillness and reflect on what you're grateful for. At the Barker household, I mentioned on the last episode, the episode that was released on Wednesday, that we had a turkey from Popeyes. Yeah, like Popeye's chicken. It was really, really good. I'm just going to hope and assume that it wasn't pumped full of preservatives and things that would make RFK Jr. super mad, but it was really good. We also talked about on the last episode how I would be doing almost like a reaction because truthfully, I have not even remotely bothered myself to look at the pretty pathetic excuse of this groundbreaking investigative reporting on me by Pablo Torre. This is a man who I've never heard of before. Not a knock at him necessarily, just someone I've never heard of. So you can imagine my surprise when a man I had never heard of releases a deep dive article titled "How Right-Wing Superstar Riley Gaines Built an Anti-Trans Empire." The subtitle says, "The swimmer tied a trans woman for fifth. The MAGA industrial complex took care of the rest." The article features this picture of me too, which doesn't make me look very good, but I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like the ambiance of it. They've got me standing there in my swimsuit from University of Kentucky, which has the University of Kentucky emblem on it. I wonder if that's some sort of copyright infringement. We should look into that. But it's got me standing, hands on the hips. I'm clearly in Washington, D.C. You've got the flag flying in the back, the Capitol building behind me, people doing my makeup, putting lipstick on me, curling my hair, spraying perfume. You've got someone who's holding a phone as if we're at a gaggle and a Fox News microphone similar to the one that I'm sat in front of right now, obviously with the OutKick emblem. So maybe this has the opposite effect as Pablo or whoever the illustrator was intended for it to have, because I actually think it looks pretty cool. This article, it's by Mother Jones. I guess that's the outlet of which Pablo partnered with. Again, I have no idea the structure of how this works. The article is super duper long, and accompanying the article is a podcast episode. Podcast episode is from Pablo's podcast, which he calls Pablo Torre Finds Out, which we will talk about why that's kind of ironic in a minute. And the title of the episode is "What is Riley Gaines Hiding? We investigated." At least that's what it's titled on YouTube. On the other podcast platforms, the episode is titled "All American Grift. We Investigated Trump's Favorite Sports Troll." Those two titles make the episode's agenda and the tone of which you're going to hear Pablo and his reporters talk about me. It makes it abundantly clear what they're trying to accomplish. And before we get into the episode and the content of this ridiculous article, let's be very, very clear what Pablo and his groupies engaged in. It isn't journalism. This was a smear campaign. If Mother Jones, if these reporters took a single moment to talk to any of the people, especially the women who have been fighting against gender ideology for over a decade, maybe there would have been a semblance of balance here. But of course, that was not the goal. The goal was to paint me as some MAGA creation, this right-wing, grievance-driven grifter, and thereby paint the entire movement to restore women's sex-based rights, to protect children, to protect parental rights as a right-wing political strategy, not based in any valid arguments, not a movement bringing women and men together from across the political divide, not a movement grounded in basic biological reality and concern for actual women. This article came out mid-November. I got an email end of October, actually October 27th to be exact. I'm looking at the email right here. It says, "Dear Riley, my name is Madison Pauly. I'm a reporter for the Center for Investigative Reporting, working on a Mother Jones magazine story and video podcast episode in collaboration with the Pablo Torre Finds Out podcast." She goes on to say this story is a profile piece of me. They'd been doing this piece for several months now. And she says, "I have a couple questions I would love to clarify with you." She says she wants to give me a chance to respond to some of these things. She then goes on to say that she spoke to 3 of my teammates at the University of Kentucky who swam with me on the women's swim team. Now, I did not respond to this email. I was not even going to give her a chance to twist my words because based on the questions that she was asking me to respond to and just how pointed and sharp and obviously biased they were, I knew this was a piece that was not coming from a place of journalistic integrity. I knew these people did not possess a shred of honesty or common sense for that matter. And I knew how this piece was going to paint me regardless of what I said. Let me read you a few of the questions that she sent over to me. Now, there will be some important context that I'll provide in a minute surrounding my time at the University of Kentucky and some allegations that came out surrounding my head coach, Lars Jorgensen, after I had graduated. He had been accused of some really horrific sexual acts against athletes on the team, which I'm not here to weigh in on if I think that's true or not. Again, this was after I had graduated. These things came to light. I will say I never saw anything. I never heard anything. I was never a part of any of this behavior he's again now being accused of. She sent over 18 questions. I'm just going to read a few to give you a little context again of why I did not respond. She says here, all 3 teammates I spoke to described abusive coaching practices in a toxic environment on the UK team under Lars Jorgensen. Is this accurate? Does this match your characterization of the team? And do you have any context to add? She says here, one swimmer I interviewed told me that you were a good teammate. Generous with your car, fun to party with, in parentheses she wrote, she said you sometimes partied hard, and friendly and respectful when 2 women on the team started dating each other. Is there anything you'd like to respond to or dispute in these descriptions? It seems like a pretty accurate description. I don't know, like generous, good teammate, friendly, respectful. Says I'm fun to party with, I partied hard, which is pretty silly. If any of you were Division I athletes, especially in a sport like swimming where there's literally no off season and you're practicing basically every single morning, you don't really have time to party hard. Yes, I found myself having good times. Of course, I was in college, but nothing like overly crazy as she's insinuating. And she talks about here how 2 women on the team started to date each other. Guess what? Shocker. I don't really care if 2 women are dating each other. It has nothing to do with me. Again, so long as it doesn't cost me my taxpayer dollars, so long as I'm not forced to celebrate it, so long as it's not being forced on children, right? Like, I don't really care what you do in your personal life. That's the beauty of America. One of these women, actually, I really would have considered a pretty good friend. We had different things that we enjoyed and cared about, so different on a fundamental level, but I respected her a lot. She was a good teammate. She worked really hard. I had respect for that. She's one of the women who was interviewed. She put her name and her face to this, which even still, I don't really care. It doesn't make me want to be her friend less. We haven't really kept up following that national championships or my time at the University of Kentucky, given the fact that we fall on different sides of this issue. She has every right to use her voice to speak to Pablo or anyone else, for that matter, on any issue she so chooses, okay? It doesn't make me think less of her. I think that's a key difference in understanding where I'm coming from. The next question says, that same swimmer also recalled a long conversation with you in summer of 2021 when she says you talked about being raised as a religious conservative. She remembers you saying that you didn't like Trump. Is this an accurate description of the views at the time? How would you say your politics have evolved since that point in your life? Is this accurate? Look, I initially endorsed DeSantis for the 2024 presidential candidate. Again, that's not really like a groundbreaking revelation. And why did I do that? I actually did that because I believed DeSantis to be the stronger conservative, the stronger Christian conservative. That being said, I am thrilled with President Trump. I am so glad that he has proven me, I don't want to say wrong, because again, I think DeSantis would have done a fantastic job as president, just as he's done in leading the state of Florida. But President Trump has come out on these issues, such as gender ideology, such as the abortion epidemic, much, much stronger in his second term than he did his first term, which thrills me as a religious Christian conservative, as my teammate described to me. And continuing to talk about the environment on the University of Kentucky team, the reporter's asking me about a sexual harassment investigation into another coach that we had, an assistant coach by the name of Chip Klein. She says that all 3 of the teammates that she talked to indicated that I was a target of Klein's behavior. This is something I've never spoken about because honestly, I think it takes time to process and really grapple with some of the abuse. I don't really use that word lightly either. I think obviously there are different kinds of abuse. You have physical abuse, emotional abuse, you have sexual abuse. Some of the different behavior that we were exposed to and targeted by in my time at the University of Kentucky. I could tell many stories of interactions that we had, forcible interactions, nothing like penetrative, which sounds like really graphic, but definitely not acceptable behavior from a coach, an authority figure to an athlete, a female student athlete. I'm not going to get into all that because I don't think it's necessary to make the point that I'm trying to make, but I will say this on this topic. I went to the Title IX office in 2021, I believe, after I had had enough with this coach's behavior. He never stepped foot back on that pool deck again. And we're going to get into the contents, again, of what this article really, the meat and potatoes of this article. But when I see Pablo saying that I don't care about sexual abuse allegations against female athletes, number one, it's personal. But two, I don't think I have to also make the point that men aren't women, right? Like, again, we'll get into that. But the reporter asked me if I wanted to share my experience with Coach Klein, and how it affected me. She goes on to say, 2 of my teammates say they're disappointed and frustrated that I haven't spoken out more about the allegations against our head coach, Lars Jorgensen, or focused my advocacy on sexual abuse by coaches. My response to that is, why haven't they done that? Guess what? None of my teammates have used their platform to disavow these things. If they feel so strongly, I would highly encourage them to do it, because guess what? It is a problem, especially in the sports like swimming, gymnastics, sports, I think unsurprisingly, where women are half naked to compete. I imagine you're not surprised to learn that this is absolutely false. I tweeted this back in 2024, in April of 2024, when all of these allegations became known to the public and at the same time became known to me. I said this: I took the weekend to spend time with current and former University of Kentucky teammates after seeing the article/lawsuit that was dropped. The general consensus is that we're disgusted, heartbroken, and ashamed to be affiliated with the program where anything like this could be alleged to have happened. Lars was someone I trusted, loved, and respected. I would have gone to bat for him and defended him until the end. I feel entirely blindsided and betrayed. To be extra clear here, I never saw or heard any of these claims taking place, but it isn't difficult to say I vehemently condemn all violence, especially sexual violence against women. While I spend most of my time speaking to the harm and severity of allowing men into women's sports, we can't neglect or condone other issues that are far too common in female athletics, like sexual abuse from authority figures. It's my mission to defend women, really humanity, and this falls in line. Time to process and digest is necessary for healing to occur. Regardless of the allegations, my stance is clear. Sexual predators should not be able to obtain or maintain a position of authority over anyone, much less a team of vulnerable, half-naked young women. And I really did. I drove up to Kentucky that weekend from my home in Nashville and spent time with teammates, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to hear my other teammates, their perspective on these issues. And as I indicated, I really was blindsided and totally betrayed in learning about the horrific details of this lawsuit. And I want to be clear, that's not to say it's true, not true. There's a civil lawsuit that's being litigated in court right now. So I'm not here to definitively make a statement, but I wanted to listen to what my teammates had to say about it. And to Pablo's point, the accusations that my coach is being accused of is really not rare at all in women's sports, and I do agree it happens far too often. People like Jen Say, who's the founder of XXXY Athletics, has talked about this ad nauseum. She actually wrote a book about it, and I said it here, I will say it again. It is the easiest thing in the world to condemn. I think an important distinction to make, though, and why I spend so much of my time speaking to the issue of men and women's sports as opposed to speaking to the harm of these predatory men in these coaching positions, is because it's not like you have an entire political party, at least in terms of elected representation. It's not like you have an entire wing of the media, actually virtually all of mainstream media for certain, saying that this is a good thing, that these predatory men in these positions is good, actually celebrating them and denouncing the people, ousting the people, doing smear pieces on the people who raise concerns with these predatory men. Are you understanding what I'm saying here? Does that make sense? That's where this issue differs from the trans issue. The reporter asked me how I'm funded. She says that the Betsy DeVos Foundation indicated that it donated $100,000 to the Riley Gaines Center at the Leadership Institute in 2023. She says, is it fair to say that Dick and Betsy DeVos Family Foundation funded you directly? No. They talk about these FEC filings that indicate I had a paid speaking engagement of $25,000 by the Harris County Republican Party for the 2025 Lincoln Reagan Day dinner. She said, did you receive that payment? Is that a typical speaking fee for you in 2025? We'll get into that. She asked me about San Francisco State. She says, you weren't actually physically hit by a man, were you? I mean, no one could actually confirm these things. There is audio and video evidence, okay, which has been posted many, many a times of how these angry, deranged, soulless ghouls held me hostage, okay? She even says here, you described the event as kidnapping. Yeah, that's typically what you would call it when you have a group of people holding someone hostage and won't let them leave. When I was supposed to be returning back home, they were keeping me there. She says, is there any additional basis for saying you were kidnapped or held for ransom? Again, the audio, the video, the police statement that I filed immediately after. I've testified before Congress on this, which you're under oath in that environment, okay? So, baloney. In 2 quotes she asked me to clarify, she says, in May of 2025, you said, the gender ideology movement is a house of cards, and I believe it's lying on the sports issue. This will be the card that makes all of it crumble. Did I say that? That's a pretty good quote, and I stand by it. 100%, 10 toes down. It is absolutely accurate. She says here, in September of 2025, you said on the Gains for Girls podcast, if you're insane enough to believe that men can get pregnant and women need prostate exams and tampons belong in boys' bathrooms or whatever the other crazy stuff that they believe, you're insane enough, clearly, to pull a gun and shoot someone. Do we need to look any further than the political assassination of Charlie Kirk? So I hope that's enough for you to understand why I did not respond to these insane allegations and questions. So they spent 6 months on this groundbreaking deep dive investigation. And what did they find? They found that my previous coach at the University of Kentucky, has been accused of sexual allegations. They found out that I have a job that I'm paid for. They found out that my messaging has gotten sharper as I have learned more about the issue. Honestly, I almost feel bad that he spent so much time on such a lackluster story. 6 months, that's a long time. And I believe he didn't even uncover my most controversial take to date, which is that I hate mashed potatoes. I hate them. I know this is maybe a sensitive topic coming right after Thanksgiving. They're disgusting. Why are we mashing them? And why are we putting sour cream, butter, and bacon? Sometimes cinnamon and brown sugar? Please, that is the weirdest combination of things I've ever heard. I don't want to hear any of you pro-potato people in the comments. They're gross. Like I said, I haven't even really looked at this beyond what I've seen on social media. Really, I didn't have the energy to go through and pick apart the sham of an investigation that is Pablo Torre's The Real Riley Gaines. But there is a couple things that I want to address. Number one, the first thing is that the position that I've taken, the advocacy that I do and will certainly continue to do, that's a grift. Do I need to remind Pablo Torre and those who seem to appreciate and agree with this article of the political cultural environment that I spoke out in back in 2022? It was a very different landscape to that of which we're living in now in the year 2025. When I spoke out, there was no $1 million sponsorship waiting for me. All of the female athletes who came before me had either been ignored, they'd been punished, they'd been belittled. I knew that, okay? I knew what I was risking, and I had no reason to suspect that I would be treated any differently than those women. But even still, I chose to use my voice because I knew it was the right thing. I think moral conviction is just a foreign concept to some people. This was under Biden's presidency. His Department of Justice was literally launching investigations into people who dared to even question or remotely oppose some of the gender insanity things that they were pushing, whether it was medicalization side of things. One of those people being Dr. Ethan Heim in Texas, a whistleblower at the Texas Children's Hospital, and saying, look, we passed a law, this hospital is still doing this. The Department of Justice launched an investigation into him for being a whistleblower, and he basically faced political persecution for 7 months. They took his cell phone, they took his guns, he had to spend time in court. It was a huge stress on his family. It took time. It was a financial investment. That's the environment that we were living in 2022. And I mentioned some of those people who came before me. I have a real problem with how Pablo calls me kind of like the main character of this movement. I reject that wholeheartedly. Honestly, this is an insult to the women who have been fighting this fight long before I ever got involved. Granted, I think this issue, specifically that photo of Thomas on the podium, him standing over me like 8-9 inches taller than me, I truthfully believe it gave a perfect visual to the concerns that so many people had been raising, so many women especially, had been raising far longer than I. But to call me the main character of this is false. I didn't start this movement, and I don't think these people understand that, again, the reason that I have become now a prominent figure, if you want to call it that, this was building for years and years and years. But the absurdity of Will Thomas calling himself Leah, stripping down naked in our locker room and stealing an NCAA Division I national championship title, despite never having even won a conference title in the men's division in full view of the public. That's when things finally exploded. But I'm not the main character of this movement. Pablo says he believes this issue of men and women's sports, it's a topic that's been around for 4 years, is what he says. The co-host jumps in and she says, no, I think it started in 2020. No. Actually, men have been stealing women's opportunities in sports since the 1920s. The media has just done their best to keep the voices of the women silent while they champion the male athlete. I'm sure you can remember Renee Richards, who came out onto the scene, I believe in the late 1970s. This was a man, a 43-year-old man standing at 6'2", who was allowed to play women's professional tennis. We saw in the 80s the doping scandal, which is very similar to the issue of men and women's sports. At the 2016 Olympics, in the women's 800, male athletes, these were not trans athletes, they were athletes, male athletes with DSDs, won gold, silver, and bronze in the women's 800. These are athletes with Y chromosomes who went through male development. In 2021, that's when we saw the male Olympic weightlifter by the name of Laurel Hubbard competing for New Zealand in the Olympics. And then we reached Will Thomas, and we have gone beyond that even. So that's a rough timeline with very few examples inserted there. I could go on for hours. The second point I want to address is that I have a job, which this is in like total contrast to what AOC said. Remember when AOC a few weeks ago, she made some comments about me saying, you know, maybe if you channeled your anger to swimming, you would have swam faster or something to the effect, to which I then challenged her to a debate. She says to me, well, I challenge you to get a real job. Well, Pablo seems to disagree with AOC. He understands that I do have a job, that I make money. They really just can't keep themselves straight. Typically how it works, which this is standard across the board, if I'm traveling, taking time out of my day to go to a state to participate in a fundraising activity, which that's what he cited in talking about this Harris County Reagan Day dinner. It was a fundraising dinner. If I'm going to give my time to be there, of course I'm going to get paid for this. They're raising funds on my name. That's only fair. This is what people like Megan Rapinoe do, which I would honestly be super interested to figure out what her speaking fee is. Let's look it up in real time together right now. Megan Rapinoe's speaking fee. Oh my gosh, I've been undercharging. This says Megan Rapinoe's speaking fee generally ranges from $50,000 to over $250,000, depending on the event's specifics. I don't see Pablo talking about Megan Rapinoe in her speaking fee. You know why? It's because she agrees that men should be in women's sports. Let's look at someone like Hillary Clinton. This is kind of just like a fun game at this point. Let's look at Hillary Clinton speaking fee. Oh my gosh, this says Hillary Clinton's speaking fee after leaving her role as Secretary of State generally averaged around $200,000 to $225,000 per appearance, some reaching as high as $300,000 for a single event. And I'm looking at this article here back in 2016. It's by CNN, by the way. It says $153 million in Bill and Hillary Clinton's speaking fees documented. $153 million. But guess what? That's capitalism. That is the free market. That's called supply and demand. People are willing to pay it. Of course, Bill and Hillary Clinton are willing to take it. And you're not going to see me knocking them for their speaking fee. I'm actually applauding it. Capitalism at its finest. Now, Pablo Torre, or Torres, whatever his name is, I would bet he's paid to write stories. Now, granted, I'm not going to do a 6-month deep dive investigation to find out if he is or isn't because I don't really care, but I'd imagine he's paid to write stories. And if that's the case, then surely he's biased because he gets paid to do it, right? That's his stance on me. I get paid, so I'm wrong. He put out this tweet on Wednesday. He says, the people funding Riley Gaines would love for you to think that this story is about trans athletes competing in women's sports. It's not. It's about following the money and the female athletes actually victimized by men that those funders cannot even pretend to care about. No, Pablo, this article is about smearing me to get more views. Honestly, for a journalist, his lack of basic comprehension is pretty concerning and it makes zero sense. Like, the fight that I'm fighting is regarding the insane trans movement that is discriminatory in its true nature. It's exclusive in its true nature. They love the word inclusion. No, it's exclusive. And also this tweet is stupid because what does any of it have to do with me, right? Like, the people who pay me, in air quotes, don't care enough about other things that have happened to women. What is Pablo doing to show that he cares about those women other than making super obnoxious podcasts? And also the tweet's simply not true, right? Like, you can care about two things at once. It doesn't have to be an either or. Like, let's say I donate to finding a cure for breast cancer. Does that mean that I don't care about finding a cure for brain cancer or for cardiovascular health research? So I guess my question to Pablo is, Like, are individuals permitted to dedicate their time and energy to specific causes? Or should we automatically go to like the whataboutism? Like, well, what about this issue? Pablo mentioned how I brought up Larry Nassar when Simone Biles and I got into this feud. And I talked about how Simone Biles had testified against Larry Nassar. He said that I was using Simone Biles' abuser against her. That's not what I was doing at all. I was calling her actions hypocritical. On one hand, she's against sexual abuse of young girls, especially female athletes. And on the other hand, she's totally okay with it. Any man forcing his way into a woman's private changing area, no matter what he calls himself, is absolutely a predator. Larry Nassar and Will Thomas. Voyeurism and indecent exposure are crimes for a reason. We have sex-separated spaces for a reason. Women and girls deserve privacy away from boys and men when we're changing. And allowing boys and men into that space is a huge violation and a form of sexual abuse. I don't know who dug up this gem, but it seems like Pablo has shifted his stance a bit too, because he tweeted this back in 2016. He says, if you're defending a man's right to expose himself to a female employee against her will at work, I humbly beg you to never procreate.
It's extremely convenient to go point at somebody like Riley Gaines, who can say, hi, I was a victim of this, who can go sit in the Kentucky legislature and say, look, there is a real victim of these policies. And that's, I think, why her story breaks through.
Yeah, there just aren't enough examples of female athletes, period, who are losing to trans athletes because there aren't that many trans athletes in general. And so you get Riley Gaines testifying not just at the Virginia state legislature, but at the Kansas state legislature and the North Carolina state legislature, all for these anti-trans bills that are being, again, put in front of these voting bodies.
The NCAA forced female swimmers to share a locker room with Thomas, a 6'4", 22-year-old male equipped with and exposing male genitalia in a room full of vulnerable, undressed women.
And in each one of those cases, what you see is that it's not just the Leah Thomas story.
From 18 to 22-year-old girls who were exposed to male body parts.
She, this single data point, Riley Gaines, is now this avatar for all girls everywhere.
Our experiences as D1 swimmers, it's not unique.
Who are in danger of quote-unquote men, these predators, in women's sports. And she goes on the road. She continues to go on the road. I mean, she's giving speeches at college campuses. I mean, it's not unlike Charlie Kirk.
I don't think he realizes that that's a compliment to be like Charlie Kirk. A couple things I want to address. First and foremost, I don't view myself as some sort of victim. I really don't. I don't possess a victim mentality. I couldn't have made it to the level that I was competing in sports if I did, okay? It's just not in my nature to view myself as a victim. That's why, honestly, it took me so long to even sue the NCAA. They explicitly and directly and intentionally violated federal law, yet I didn't see myself as a victim. Therefore, I wasn't really wanting to sue them. But I understand now that it's necessary in ultimately accomplishing the goal, which the goal is keeping men out of women's sports. He also plays that emotional testimony that I gave. This was several years back. I believe that was in the state of Virginia. It was when my emotions were much more heightened surrounding this. It's kind of like surreal to look back and watch. I remember how I was feeling in that moment. Obviously nervous, right? Being a college age student, recently graduated, to stand in front of, legislators at the state level. Like, that was really terrifying to me. And I want to make the point too, he's talking about me traveling all over. I don't get paid when I travel and testify on bills and help draft these pieces of legislation and meet with lawmakers and teach them how to speak about these issues, the messaging behind it, how to be effective. I don't get paid for that. There's no lobbyist group who funds my work. There are different organizations that I do work for, but even at this time, I was flying to these places entirely out of my own pocket because I understood it as necessary and timely and urgent and righteous and just and moral and just the right thing to do. Again, a foreign concept to some. And Pablo says that I'm this single data point and that there's not that many trans athletes. That's always what they say, which is a horrible argument, by the way, because you're not really saying that you agree or disagree. You're just saying, well, it hasn't happened enough yet for me to have an opinion. So what Pablo is effectively saying here is that Yes, some girls have been affected, but those girls don't really matter. Maybe it would be an issue if this was happening more often, if more women were getting pummeled in their sports like we saw in women's boxing at the Olympics. Maybe then it would matter. Probably not, though. Maybe if more women had to expose themselves while simultaneously being exploited to naked men, maybe then it would matter. Maybe if more women were like given career-ending concussions, we would care. But where it stands right now, we really don't. And to refute the point that it's not really happening, honestly, I hate even having to do this because people know that it's happening. It's happening in states like Oregon, California, Washington. We just watched in Michigan where this happened at the girls' high school state championship in the sport of volleyball. If you look up the website shewon.org, it says on their website's page, it's a website dedicated to archiving the achievements of female athletes who were displaced by males in women's sporting events and other types of competitions expressly for women. One day soon, we hope their accomplishments will be formally recognized. It has counted and tracked and recorded the number of female athletes who have been affected by this is 2,900. The number of medals that have been taken from women by cheating men is 4,231 across 1,784 different competitions and across 51 sports. So, Pablo, did you consider maybe for your story reaching out to any of these women? No, I don't think so. Only my teammates who choose to disavow me, like the 3 of them that exist. He somehow found them all. The rest of my team, by the way, we're a team of like 40 girls. So naturally, when you're a team of 40 girls, you're going to have some people who disagree with you on these issues. The rest of my team, though, 35 of them, I would say. Maybe we have different levels of, willingness to use the pronouns, and we vary on those things. But the rest of us agree that it's wrong to put men in women's sports, that it's unfair to women. Notice he didn't talk to those athletes. And before we really close out, I think it's important to make the point. I didn't ask to be here. I really didn't. This isn't what I wanted for myself. I've talked about that before on this podcast. I didn't set my sights on becoming this political pundit, as Pablo calls me. It's never what I wanted. I mean, I think you would have to be clinically insane to ask to be in the position that I'm in, to actively work towards being a target for people like Pablo. It's not fun to read the negative, hurtful, and totally false things people say about you. I'm just a normal person. I'm a woman. I was a female athlete. I had plans to be in dental school. I was accepted into dental school. Those were the plans that I had made for myself. I'm married. I'm a wife. I'm now a new mom, which it's not very fun to be fielding a bunch of negative comments when you're, just a few weeks postpartum, which I have to imagine it was intentional. Pablo released this article just after I had my baby, which speaks to how evil these people can be. The death threats that I receive nearly daily, the extra security precautions that my husband and I have to take to make sure that my safety, and now more importantly, our daughter's safety is ensured. Who would want to do that? And I will say there have been fantastic opportunities, and I have been abundantly blessed with relationships and friendships and doors that have been opened that otherwise, having not used my voice, doors that wouldn't have been opened. I recognize those things. I'm grateful for those things. I'm grateful for the lifestyle that I have, being able to, with the occupation that I do, being able to stay home with my daughter, or if I'm traveling, her being able to travel with me. My husband, he has a construction company. He has some flexibility. He gets to travel with me some. I recognize those things, and I recognize how blessed I am. Of course I do. But it's not my fault that I'm here. You can thank people like Will Thomas for me having the voice and the platform that I have. So to Pablo, on your 6-month deep dive investigation into Riley Gaines and her private life and who she is, nothing you reported was groundbreaking. Actually, really only thing you did was re-report other people's work, which feels really slimy, actually. The only groundbreaking thing you did was talk to my teammates, 2 of which who weren't even willing to put their name or their face to this. That was the only real piece of journalism, if that's what you want to call it. The rest of this was stealing other people's work, claiming it as your own, and trying to twist a narrative to paint me in a bad light, which it didn't really work. If you go through Pablo's comments on social media, I think people just recognize this as him embarrassing himself, and really it only makes me look better. It only gives me more credibility. So maybe I should thank him. Thank you, Pablo. Thank you, Mother Jones. I didn't know you before. I don't really care to know you after this, but the coverage that you provided on these issues to anyone with a 5th grade understanding of biology, a shred of common sense, I think is on our side, which is the right side of history. As always, we appreciate you guys. I hope you were watching at youtube.com/OutKick. That's where you can find all things Gains for Girls. We had some stuff on screen, so if you weren't watching, go back and watch. Look at the visuals and the clips and the inserts that we put in. Be sure to comment. Don't want to hear any of you pro-potato people in the comments, though. I hope you enjoyed your Thanksgiving, took some time to relax and be grateful. Until next time, we'll see you guys soon.